Hello everyone, welcome back to the KMTRADERS channel. So this is the full market analysis volume 98, just giving you an insight of what we think is going to happen next week and compare our analysis from last week also. So yeah, we're going to start off with gold. So what we were looking at last week was a potential downfall move. So if you manage to get involved with a short-term sell-off position, there was obviously a lot of price moving to the downside last week. Personally, I didn't really necessarily think that price was going to drop so much, and that's why we were personally anticipating, the buying opportunity. But for now, this is pretty much bearish right now. So moving on forward for next week, I think that we could potentially keep in frame of this bearish move to the downside. And I'm looking at 1760. If we could stay above this, then I believe that we could still have some sort of we could have a potential bullish scenario that will come into play. So that's what I'm ideally looking out for. So we could see there's some sort of support being formed here around 1780, depending on really if this blows through or if this holds. The next target that we could anticipate is probably into the 1900s, or essentially above this high here. So that's where I would be looking out for. But if we do blow below 1760, I think what we could then look for is potential scenarios of the downside. But I would probably have to wait for more price action to unfold, because if we start to see some rejections which could indicate that there's bullish pressure coming in, then we could obviously still have this swing move towards the upside, and that's what I'm really anticipating. So again, this buy rate here is not really that strong, but it's going to give me kind of like a pre-warning where if we start to blow below this, then I'm really going to have to look into price action a bit more. And then obviously if we start to break lower 1720, I think it'll be pretty I think it will be confirmation that there definitely is some sort of reversal happening, and in that sense I'll have to probably do another update video just to give my further insight on this and just kind of look over everything. But for now, as price is where it is right now, I'm happy to say that there is a potential bullish opportunity here. So I am looking for price to potentially swing up into 1900s, hoping that we can hold above 1760. Okay, so moving on now to EURJPY. So what we were anticipating was pretty much a pullback at some point, and we didn't really find any pullback opportunity from during the week. We pretty much just had a continuation move lower and lower and lower. So again, sells were valid. But at the end of the week, we started to see this nice bullish pressure coming into play. If we take a look at some of our divergence, there is some sort of divergence forming here. So this is again just a quick note. So where price action is different towards the peaks and the bottoms, to price action and to the RSI indicator. So divergence is there, so indicating that there is temporary weakness in the market. So with that, we can see prices pushing up, and this is what this leg here is, and that's what we waited for. So let's just move all this across. I think a better way of doing it, is probably just remapping it. So let me just quickly do this. So just up, down. So again, this is just kind of what we looked at last week. So if we could just move this across and get rid of these. So essentially this was the mapping that we were looking into for last week. We can see that price is pretty much sticking to what we're saying right now. Obviously this can all change very suddenly, so don't let this be don't stick to this. Just kind of see what price is doing in the moment. So we can see that now price is pushing up, and this is pretty much this leg here. So essentially what we're trying to do now is to see if this is going to still hold up. So I personally think that this could still possibly drop down. So that doesn't mean that we're just going to take instant sells. We need to see obviously price action develop. So in theory, we could still be potentially looking for short-term holds to the upside, so short-term buys. So we can expect a potential pullback for price to push up just a little higher, and then if, for example, we get this scenario early off in the week, and then midweek, let's say, or end of the week, we start to see, you know, some massive pin bars and price struggling to fail to push higher, this could indicate that this is potentially turning over. And then once that does, then we could start to potentially look at some selling opportunities. So really, we could be just really anticipating these two moves over the next few days. So where price is pushing up just a little bit, and then potentially price pushing lower. That could be probably next week or so, but ideally, you know, this is the map that we're trying to look out for. So essentially, if we were to look at our long-term bias, we are bullish, but we have to wait for price to completely exhaust towards the downside. So I feel like from what we can see right now, there's a lot of pressure coming into the downside. And I'm not really sure right now if price is willing to reverse just yet. So that's why I think from you know, following on from the main trends, we still need to follow the downside move, as price really does look like it's bearish still. So let's not forget about that, and yeah, just keep trading with this, you know, this short-term moves, and obviously long-term moves can wait for down the line. So we'll see what happens over the next few days. But yeah, let's moving on to NZDUSD. So let's take a look what we've seen. So what we were actually looking at was 0.69 as a support level, but completely blown through. Was looking at for price to make a reversal. I was actually looking at taking a buying opportunity, but really price never really gave us an opportunity to even do so. So luckily we stayed out of this. So we can go ahead now and get rid of all of these buy side scenarios, as we've now broken this 0.69 level. So now that we've broken through, this comes now into our third scenario that we left on from last week, I believe, or whenever we drew this in. Essentially what we were saying is, if we get this break, we're potentially looking for a retest now. So effectively, I feel like this is what's going to happen. So as prices, well, let's just move this up a bit here. As prices like here right now, so we could expect maybe price to push lower during the early start of the week, and then maybe we could have, maybe we could then have price to, you know, make a pullback, a significant pullback. So we can move this on to here, just spread this around 0.69 area and really see how it responds to this area. And maybe we could get a retest on this. So essentially what we're trying to do now is just to continue this main trend to the downside. So ideally here, and then we can also look at these intermediate trends. So what we could be looking at is where price starts to break this downtrend and then starts to fall down like so. So that's just a little idea, but if we just get rid of this just for clarity's sakes and just to make the charts look a bit cleaner, essentially that's what we're trying to do then. So we're trying to pretty much gauge where the market's going, so we could probably get a potential buying opportunity, but also we could also look at you know, if price does present us an opportunity to take a short, you know, maybe a little pullback and then a continuation lower, then we can definitely do so along the way. So we don't have to obviously stick to buying opportunities. We can be a part of the sell-off that's currently happening right now. We just have to be aware that there are pullbacks in line, and that's due to this massive drop off in price. So price will never just drop. It has to pull back at some time, and that's where you're going to have to think about, is this going to be a bullish scenario or is this going to be a bearish scenario overall? Okay, so that's pretty much the outlook for NZDUSD. Let's take a look at AUD. So as already know, we can see that there's been a similar kind of confluence with NZD. Price has pretty much blown through the 0.72 barrier. Again, we were anticipating price to potentially make a reversal, and then we were looking for price to make that move. But as we can see, you know, just from our last week's downtrend drawings, you know, we never really broke it, so it never really gave us a reason to kind of partake into the market. So we're coming to the last barrier at 0.71. Now, is it really going to turn over? We'll have to see, but my bets are probably likely, you know, again, we don't guess here, we don't really guess, but if we were to, you know, kind of suggest or kind of give some sort of scenario, there's a more possibility that price will break through 0.71, and that's where we're going to be focusing on a retest trade and pushing lower. So that's what I'll probably do. Whether that this pullback obviously, you know, rejects off 0.71, or if it starts to pull back a little higher, that's totally up to the market, and that's where again the trading system has to come into play, and that's where your rules and everything, and that's your edge in the market. But ideally, you know, these forecasts just give you a general outline, and it's up to you to, you know, decide if the market is, you know, pulling back, or if it's going to continue, or if it's going to continue to push higher, etc. So there's a lot of scenarios that can go on, and obviously I'll do my best to give you my ideal setups and what I'm looking for. But again, scenarios and you know, actual entries into the market are two different things, so don't let that confuse you. Definitely put some time into the charts, and hopefully you can start to see all these moves that I'm thinking and looking into. Okay, so yeah, as I was saying before, this 0.71 does look like it could potentially be run through, and if so, then we could again look at a situation where we could look at a sell, you know, on a short-term perspective. If that does happen, let's move this across. But essentially, you know, there is a possibility still that price can reject off this level and push higher. So, you know, we really just have to be open-minded with it, not really have a strict bias. We don't need to force anything. We'll just stick to what we can see into the market. Okay, so looking at USDJPY now, I am actually looking at this on a long potential. We can see that there's been an absolute crash in market. If we take a look at the RSI, you know, we do have an oversold condition here. But essentially what I'm ideally looking out for is to see if this 113 level can hold. If it can, then we could expect price to rally towards the upside. So that's still one scenario that we can look at. So we could look at a buying opportunity. If we can get rid of this, we could probably move this to now 1.1155. So this kind of level here. And then the second scenario that, well, the third scenario that we drew on from last week was this idea that if price was to drop massively, break 113, then we can look at some retest trades. So I am going to keep this second scenario in now, or move it as a second scenario. And these are the scenarios that I'm looking at for this week in USDJPY. So this really did drop off rapidly through the end of the week, so we'll see what this is going to unfold. Again, there could be some nice buying opportunity along the way. We'll just have to see, but it really depends if the 113 level will hold. Okay, so moving on to CADJPY, a huge drop in again this pair. There was a lot of strength in the Japanese yen due to the COVID variant. So again, I don't really watch the news, but anyway, this is something that, you know, when price drops 2.8% in a day, that's really kind of unheard of. So I always look at, you know, what actually caused that, and it's usually some kind of fundamental news. So this has been a very big drop indeed, but again, looking at it from price action and technical analysis standpoint, I think it's fair to say that we are probably bearish from this, and what we anticipated from last week was a potential bullish scenario. But again, this isn't neglecting my idea that in the long term we are going to probably push up higher. So let me just get rid of, well, yeah, we can keep this one actually. So yeah, what we can move on from this, and what we can take from this, is pretty much that as price is dropping off rapidly, we can obviously expect some sort of pullback and a continuation lower. So that could be, you know, your entry to look out for, which is a sell. But if in the case where price absolutely recovers from this downside move, we could be looking at, you know, something like this. This is a very second-ish scenario, so I'll probably put that as a third scenario. But the second scenario that I will be looking out for is if this plays out. So if we get price to pull back, push lower, we could then expect price to drop lower, and potentially, sorry, just do something like this. I just made that very complicated than it needed to be. So essentially just attach that to there. So essentially, you know, if we get this to play out, so we get a pullback, a sell-off, and then if we start to see rejections, we could look at that as the new buying opportunity, which we were potentially looking out for from the last few weeks. So this could be a potential opportunity for longs in the future, but I wouldn't look at taking longs right now. I would be looking to continue on this sell-off momentum and see if it's really going to push lower. And yeah, really that's what I'm looking out for. Okay, so moving on to EJ. So yeah, what we looked at here was again the possibility that 128 was going to break through, and we can see that price pretty much did that. So we can see price kind of rejecting right now. It is struggling. So I feel like this mapping of what we drew from last week is pretty much valid. I'm pretty happy with this for now. We could expect possibility of price making a recovery, so returning over, but that doesn't mean it's going to reverse right now. There is this opportunity where price, you know, if it wants to push up a little higher and then continue to do a push lower, then that can still happen. So effectively there could be a sell-off, a miniature sell-off during the week that continues to push lower, and then there could be this opportunity where price pushes up higher. So this is where we could potentially look into. Maybe I will probably expect this to be not as aggressively lower, but maybe, you know, just on this annotation where price is going to continue to move bullish. Okay, so we're just kind of just waiting for price to do its thing. We're not really rushing into any trades. We need to wait for price to kind of show us that tell sign tail, if that makes sense. So just moving on to AUDJPY. So what we were looking at is a bullish opportunity, but we completely burst through that again with the news coming out. So we're going to probably look into now the idea that we can expect some sort of pullback. And then in that case, if we do get this pullback, we can take a short and we can take a sell based on the fact that, you know, price is bearish, and if it still continues to be bearish, you know, we will have got into a sell, if that makes sense. And then the scenario that we are waiting for is for price to make a bullish switch, so we could then potentially look at a buy. And yeah, so the second scenario that I'm going to pinpoint as well is that if price is to massively recover from this drop and break above 83, even 83.5, we could then wait for a bullish pressure to move in. So I probably will extend this for now. 83. So if we break above this 83 level, and as you can see, there's a lot of you know, support, break of support, potential resistance, you know, resistance, boom, drop. So this is for me, it's a nice level to kind of keep in mind. So roughly at 83 to 83.5. If we get the break above it, we could then potentially look at a retest. So something ideal there. Finally, for the last two pairs for this week is USDCHF. So what we was anticipating from this wasn't necessarily price to break the high of this, but because we can see there is a rejection forming here. So there is a little bias that we've got now. We've had a little bit of a change of something. So as we've had this drop in price action, we're going to really see if we're going to get a pullback and continue to drop. But if we manage to break the 91 level, it's going to be a different scenario, because if we do, then we're going to definitely continue to fall. So essentially the mapping is like this, where we're going to watch for this, but what I think could potentially happen is we'll break up and push higher, and that's because this move here has now shown an intention to push higher. So this is one scenario that I'm keeping in the back of my mind. Again, this is very futuristic, so anything can happen from now, but for just as a main takeaway from this pair for just this week purely, let's just zero in on what's happened last week. So, you know, we can see that there's massive sell-off, so it's probably wise to look for a continuation to the downside, and that's probably really what you want to take away from this for this week. So now what I'm looking at and what I'm talking about now is just the potential future. If you really do want to hold on to trades for the long run, I don't really advise it. I would ideally just say, take some profits and lock some in. But I do like to kind of give some kind of mapping just to help you kind of think about, some up and coming ideas. And that's how I personally like to trade. So yeah, anyway. So yeah, this is one scenario where I'm happy to say that price is potentially going to continue to push lower. Then what I'm concerned about is if price is going to find some difficulty in pushing lower here. So around the 91, the 91.5 area, if we start to see some potential bullish pressure kicking in, then this could indicate we could then potentially make a strong reversal towards the upside, potentially going above 0.94, so up to there. So that's obviously one scenario. The other scenario is that if we just have a minor pullback, sorry, my voice is cracked. If we had a minor pullback and then have a complete breakthrough of 0.91, then I'll be confident to just pretty much continue on to hold these sales. Okay, so that's where my mindset is right now. We don't really have to look at this too much. Again, it's just throwing something out there to give a little bit of a warning for my future analysis as well. So yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. But for this week, again, main takeaway, we're ideally looking for some sell-off opportunities. Okay, so looking at USDCAD as the last pair for this week. So what I was personally anticipating was for price to really make a turnover. We didn't really get that at all. We had much more of a push towards the upside. It kind of reversed, but it never really gave us some commitment, I guess. And then it completely rallied towards the upside. So we're really going to see now, is this strong? As we can see here, price is almost diverging still. Well, it is diverging. So this could indicate that there is potential weakness on this upside. So what we're really going to do now is just kind of take it by price action. So I'm going to move this towards the, well, actually, I'm going to get rid of this actually. What I'm probably just going to stick on to just for this week is just go on it move by move. I don't really have an idea exactly of where price is going on the higher time frames right now. Just need to let price unfold. So that is obviously on the daily and the weekly and the monthly perspective, but basing on what we can take away for this week and what we could expect for just a 1 week time frame period, we could potentially anticipate a pullback, so a push lower, and then maybe a continuation higher. And that's probably where I'm ultimately going to just look at. Again, if you wanted to take a counter trend trade, you can also do so. That's if we start to see price start to pull down. That's obviously something that you can do, but again, it really depends if you're comfortable to trade like that. The other scenario is that if we get a complete reversal and we break 126.5, as I'm using 1265 as a new structure higher low. So if we break that, we could expect a new continuation lower. So again, push lower, retest, and break lower. Okay, so this would be then the ideal retest trade that you'd look at. So again, just two short-term scenarios that I'm looking at. Probably can squeeze a few hundred pips, maybe. Sorry, not a few hundred pips, at least 100 or so pips. And that's probably where I'll be focusing on for this week. I don't really have any idea of holding these trades in one particular direction just yet. I think I need to see price unfold just a little bit more. So we are coming into December, and usually we start to see a bit of slowdown in price action as we get into Christmas times and New Year. But as soon as January comes, we can expect a lot more. Well, eventually faster pace. So we will probably start to see a dying of momentum in terms of trades as well coming into December. So yeah, we'll just have to see what happens through the week and through the next few weeks, obviously, as well. So again, guys, if you made it all the way to the end of this video, I do appreciate your time for listening. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be happy to get back to you as soon as I can. But yeah, if you did get any value from this, leave a like, make sure you're subscribed, and thank you very much for listening and your time, and we'll see you all in our next week's video.